3 years of planning, 3 years of cold calculation, 3 years waiting for the perfect moment to destroy the one person his enemy truly loved. Detective Declan Hayes had mapped every detail, studied every weakness, crafted the perfect trap. But there was one variable he hadn't accounted for, one thing that could unravel everything he'd built on hatred and grief. Her innocence, her trust, the way she looked at him like he was capable of goodness when all he'd known for years was rage. Aurora didn't know she was falling in love with her own destruction, and Declan didn't know that seducing her would become his own undoing. Because revenge, when it wears the face of love, has a way of turning on its architect. If this story touches you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive and allows us to continue bringing stories that move the soul. Pain has a smell. Declan Hayes learned that the night he lost Melissa, the smell of burnt rubber, twisted metal, gasoline spilling onto wet asphalt. 3 years later, he still woke up with that scent in his nostrils, even though it was just memory, even though it was just the ghost of a tragedy that never left him. It was an ordinary Tuesday in autumn when everything collapsed. Melissa was coming home from work, tired but happy, sending cheerful messages about the dinner they'd cooked together. "Got wine and that cheese you love," read the last message, followed by a heart emoji. Declan pocketed his phone and smiled, not knowing that would be the last time she'd ever send him anything. The 146 bus was traveling down Michigan Avenue when Marcus Westwood, driving his silver Mercedes at over 60 miles per hour, ran a red light. Witnesses later said he didn't even try to brake. The impact was brutal, deafening, final. The bus flipped 3 times before slamming into a light pole. 17 people died instantly. Melissa was one of them. Declan was at home setting the table when he got the call. The paramedic's voice was professional, careful, trained to deliver tragedies with delicacy. But there's no delicacy gentle enough to soften the news that the person you love most in the world has just been ripped from your life because of a rich man's recklessness who decided to drive drunk. At the hospital, he identified the body. Melissa's face was intact, almost serene, as if she were just sleeping. Declan held her cold hand for hours, unable to accept that the warmth, that laugh, that vibrant life had been extinguished forever. "I love you," he whispered over and over, as if the words could bring her back, but the dead don't hear, and the living are left alone with their despair. The trial was a farce. Marcus Westwood hired the best lawyers money could buy. They turned a mass murder into a tragic accident. They argued that Marcus was under extreme emotional stress due to business problems. They presented paid medical reports attesting to a supposed psychological condition. They brought witnesses who blatantly lied about the car's speed. Declan watched it all from the gallery, fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his own palms. Blood trickled between his fingers, but he didn't feel it. Physical pain was insignificant compared to the injustice he was witnessing. The victims' families cried, begged for justice, but their voices were drowned out by the power of money and influence. The sentence was announced on a cold winter morning. 200 hours of community service. Driver's license suspended for 2 years. $50,000 fine, a ridiculous amount for someone who moved millions. No prison time, no real consequences. Marcus Westwood walked out of the courthouse with a discreet smile, adjusting his expensive tie, while 17 families walked out with shattered hearts. Declan didn't cry. Something inside him died in that moment, something that would never return. The sadness was replaced by a cold, calculated, patient fury. He'd been a detective for 12 years. He knew the law, knew its failures, knew the loopholes through which men like Marcus Westwood escaped. If the system wouldn't deliver justice, he would. For 3 years, Declan became a shadow. He investigated every aspect of Marcus's life, discovered his shady business deals, his mistresses, his vices, his weaknesses. But nothing was strong enough. Marcus was protected by layers of lawyers, corrupt politicians, and accountants who knew how to hide dirty money. That's when Declan discovered Aurora, the twin sister. The only person in the world for whom Marcus Westwood showed any kind of genuine affection. In all the investigations, in all the phone taps, there was one constant. Marcus spoke of Aurora with a gentleness he used with no one else. "She's the only pure thing left in our family," he'd once told an associate. Declan studied Aurora from afar for 3 months. She was different from her brother in every way. She lived modestly, in a simple apartment in Wicker Park. She worked as a visual artist, selling paintings in small galleries. She avoided the Westwood family's social events. There was something genuinely good about her, something that contrasted violently with her brother's rottenness. And that's exactly what made her the perfect target. Declan's plan was simple and cruel. He would approach Aurora, gain her trust, make her fall madly in love. Then, when she was completely surrendered, he would reveal who he really was. The detective who'd spent 3 years pursuing Marcus, the man whose fiancée died in the accident her brother caused. And then he would abandon her, shattered, forcing Marcus to watch the person he loved most disintegrate. It would be the perfect revenge, an eye for an eye, pain for pain. Marcus had taken Melissa from him. Declan would take Aurora from Marcus. He didn't know yet that some revenge comes with a higher price than we imagine, and that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. October rain in Chicago had a particular quality, cold, persistent, the kind that soaked to the bone and left the streets gleaming under the streetlights. Declan Hayes stood on the corner of Rush Street and Division, pretending to check messages on his phone, but actually watching the entrance to a small bookstore across the street. It was Tuesday, 6:15 in the evening. Aurora Westwood left the bookstore every Tuesday at 6:20. He'd mapped her routine with surgical precision. He knew she bought coffee at the corner before going in, that she spent exactly 40 minutes inside, that she always came out with at least 2 books under her arm. The plan was simple. A casual encounter, perfectly orchestrated to seem accidental. Declan checked his watch. 6:18. She'd be out any moment. The bookstore door opened, and there she was, dark brown hair falling over her shoulders, wet from the fine rain. She wore a worn army green coat, faded jeans, white sneakers stained with paint. She carried 4 books against her chest, trying to protect them from the water. She wasn't carrying an umbrella. Declan already knew she never did. He crossed the street at the exact moment, calculating the timing perfectly. 3 steps ahead of her, he adjusted his own pace to slow down. Aurora, distracted trying to balance the books, didn't notice. The impact was gentle but sufficient. The books slipped from her hands and fell onto the wet sidewalk, the pages absorbing the dirty water. "Oh, no!" Aurora immediately knelt down, trying to rescue the volumes. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you." Declan also knelt, grabbing 2 of the books before they got completely soaked. Their hands touched when they both reached for the same copy, 100 Years of Solitude, the cover already damp. The touch was electric, unexpected. Declan felt something pass through his skin, something that wasn't in the script. Aurora raised her eyes, and for the first time, he saw her face up close. She was beautiful, but not in the traditional way. There was a fragility in her features, a delicacy that seemed out of place in the brutal world Declan inhabited. But it was her eyes that held his attention, deep brown, moist not just from the rain, but from something more, sadness, as if she carried an invisible weight. "It's okay," she said softly, taking the books from his hands. "Just a few splashes." Declan noticed her hands, small, stained with blue and red acrylic paint. Short nails, no polish. Hands that created things, that touched the world carefully. "Let me pay for the books," he offered, standing up and extending his hand to help her. Aurora hesitated for a second before accepting. When she stood up, she was so close that Declan could smell her. Paint, coffee, something floral and discreet. "You don't have to. They were already used anyway." She smiled slightly, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Rory." Rory, not Aurora. She was hiding, even from her own name. "Declan." He offered his hand. When she shook it, the touch was firm but gentle. "Do you live around here?" Aurora asked, adjusting the books against her chest again. "Close enough." Another lie. He lived on the other side of the city, but he'd studied her neighborhood like a military map. "Let me buy you coffee?" To make up for the scare. Aurora studied him for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a disturbing intuition, as if she could see through the layers he'd so carefully constructed. "I don't usually accept invitations from strangers," she said finally. "Technically, we're not strangers anymore. You already know my name." A genuine smile this time, small but real. "Fair enough." They walked to a coffee shop on the corner, a cozy place with scratched wooden tables and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee. Aurora chose a corner near the window where she could watch the rain falling on the street. Declan noticed she always chose places near exits, another detail he'd noted during surveillance. "So, Rory," Declan began when they sat down, "what makes you go out in the rain just to buy books? Books don't wait for sunny days." She wrapped her hands around the hot cup, her fingers still stained with paint. "And you? What makes you walk distracted down Rush Street, bumping into innocent people?" "Work." Another lie. "What kind of work?" "Consulting." The lie flowed easily. He'd rehearsed. "Nothing very interesting." Aurora observed him for a long moment. Those brown eyes seemed to penetrate deeper than was comfortable. "You have sadness in your eyes," she said suddenly, "like you come from somewhere where something bad happened." Declan felt his chest tighten. How could she see that? How, in 15 minutes, could this woman see what he'd hidden for 3 years? "Everyone carries something," he responded, his voice lower than he intended. "True." Aurora lowered her eyes to her cup. "Me too." Silence. The rain beat against the window, creating patterns that ran like tears down the glass. Declan knew he should steer the conversation, maintain control, follow the script. But something in that moment destabilized him. "You mentioned not liking to go out with strangers," he said finally. "Bad experience?" Aurora smiled bitterly. "Complicated family. I learned early that people aren't always what they seem." "Is your family from here in Chicago?" A shadow passed over her face. "Yes, but I distanced myself. My brother—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He does things that hurt innocent people, and my family always finds a way to justify it, to hide it, to buy the silence of those who were hurt." Declan felt anger rise up his throat. She knew, maybe not the details, but she knew her brother was a monster. And even so, Marcus loved her. The irony was cruel. "Do you feel guilty for the things he does?" Declan asked. "Every day." Her voice was almost a whisper. "Every day I wake up and think about the people he's hurt, the families he's destroyed, and I can't do anything but distance myself and try to be different." In that moment, something cracked inside Declan. Aurora wasn't just the target of revenge. She was a victim too, a victim of Marcus, just as he himself was. But he couldn't have pity, couldn't deviate from the plan. "You paint," he said, changing the subject, pointing to the paint stains on her hands. Aurora looked at her own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "I try. It's the only thing that makes me feel like I'm still myself." "Can I see some of your work someday?" She studied him again, that penetrating look. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Why wouldn't I be? Because people usually want something." Her sincerity was a knife. Declan held her gaze. Maybe I just want to meet someone who buys 4 books on a rainy afternoon. Aurora smiled, a small, cautious smile, but genuine. Okay, you can see my paintings, if you promise not to laugh. I promise. They stayed in the cafe for another hour. Aurora talked about art, about the places she'd like to visit, about how she sometimes felt invisible even in the middle of a crowd. Declan listened, asked the right questions, smiled at the appropriate moments. All part of the plan. But when they said goodbye at the cafe door, when Aurora looked at him one last time before turning and disappearing into the rain, Declan felt something he didn't expect. Guilt. 3 weeks. 21 days since the encounter in the rain. 5 carefully planned meetings, each more intimate than the last. Declan Hayes was executing the plan with military precision, but something was getting out of control. Something inside him that he could no longer contain. The second meeting was at a small gallery in Logan Square, where Aurora was exhibiting 3 paintings. Declan showed up casually, feigning surprise at finding her. She wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back in a messy bun, and there was a genuine nervousness in the way she showed her works. This one, she pointed to a canvas dominated by shades of blue and grey. I painted after a dream where I was drowning, but I wasn't afraid. It was almost peaceful. Declan stood before the painting for a long moment. There was something disturbingly honest there, loneliness transformed into art, pain made visible. It's powerful, he said. And for the first time in weeks, he wasn't lying. You really think so? Aurora moved closer, standing beside him. Most people find it too heavy. The best art always is. She smiled, and Declan realized he was beginning to memorize that smile, the way it slowly lit up her face, like a dawn breaking through darkness. The third meeting was at Lincoln Park, on a Saturday afternoon, when autumn painted the trees gold and red. They walked for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Aurora told him about her childhood, about how she'd always felt different from the rest of the family, about how her mother died when she was 15, and how that brought her closer to and simultaneously distanced her from her twin brother. Marcus was always intense, she said, looking at the lake. When our mother died, something in him hardened. He decided the world was cruel, and that he needed to be even crueler to survive. And you? I decided the world already had enough cruelty. It didn't need one more person contributing. Declan wanted to say so many things. He wanted to shout that her brother had killed 17 people. He wanted to shake Aurora and make her understand that there was blood on the Westwood family's hands. But instead, he just took her hand. Aurora looked at their intertwined fingers, surprised. She didn't pull away. The fourth meeting was at a small bookstore in Wicker Park, where there was a poetry reading. Aurora invited him by text, hesitant, adding, "No pressure if it's not your thing." Declan went. He sat beside her on an uncomfortable metal chair, listening to poems about love and loss, and the whole time he was intensely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her arm brushing his, the soft smell of paint, and something floral. When a poet read verses about second chances, Aurora turned her head and whispered, "Do you believe in second chances?" "I believe some people deserve them," Declan responded, his voice low. "And others don't?" "And others don't." Aurora studied him in that small space between them. "You're complicated, Declan. And you're too good for this world, Rory." Something passed between them in that moment. An electric current, a connection Declan couldn't name. Aurora lowered her eyes, her cheeks slightly flushed. The fifth meeting was at Millennium Park, under an old tree that offered shade even in the late afternoon. They sat on the grass, Aurora with a sketchbook on her lap, making quick sketches of people passing by. Declan watched, fascinated by the way she captured someone's essence in just a few lines. "Have you ever drawn someone from memory?" he asked. "Sometimes." She didn't look up from the paper. When the person stays marked here. She lightly touched her chest. Am I marked? Aurora paused. Slowly, she turned a page and began to draw. Declan stayed quiet, watching the lines take shape, his face emerging from the white paper, but there was something different. In the eyes she drew, there was less sadness than he usually carried. There was hope. Is this how you see me? He asked when she finished. It's how I want you to be. Her sincerity was a stab. Declan took the notebook from her hands, set it aside, and held her face in his hands. Rory, I know, she whispered. I feel it too. You shouldn't. You don't really know me. Then let me know you. And it was there, under that tree, with the sun setting behind Chicago's skyscrapers, that Declan Hayes kissed Aurora Westwood for the first time. It wasn't the calculated kiss he'd planned. It was desperate, urgent, like a drowning man searching for air. He kissed her as if he could absorb all her innocence, all her goodness, as if he could redeem himself through that contact. Aurora responded with an intensity that surprised her. Her hands moved up to his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and for a moment the world disappeared. There was no revenge, no Marcus, no Melissa. There were just the two of them, lost in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Aurora touched her own lips, eyes wide. That was, I know. With you it's different, she confessed, her voice trembling. You scare me and calm me at the same time. I can't explain it. Declan pulled her into an embrace, burying his face in her hair. The sweet scent mixed with paint was intoxicating. You shouldn't trust me, he whispered against her temple. Why not? Because I could hurt you. Aurora pulled back enough to look into his eyes. Everyone can hurt everyone, Declan. It's a risk we take when we decide to let someone in. And you're letting me in? I already have. Those two words sealed something between them. Declan felt his chest tighten with a toxic mixture of desire and guilt. The plan was working perfectly. Aurora was falling in love, opening up, becoming vulnerable exactly as he'd engineered. But there was a problem he hadn't anticipated. He was falling in love too. In the following days, Declan tried to convince himself it was just part of the performance. That the butterflies in his stomach when he saw a message from her were calculated. That the way he smiled when hearing her voice on the phone was rehearsed. That the feeling of peace when he was beside her was strategic. But he knew the truth. For the first time in 3 years, since the night Melissa died, Declan Hayes was feeling something beyond pain and hatred. He was feeling hope. He was feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond revenge. And that terrified him more than anything, because Aurora Westwood still didn't know that the man who'd kissed her under that tree, the man who held her hand and memorized her smiles, was the same man who had planned to destroy her. She didn't know that every moment of happiness they shared was built on a lie, and when she found out, because she would inevitably find out, Declan knew there would be no possible forgiveness. But even knowing this, even carrying the weight of the betrayal to come, he couldn't stop, couldn't walk away, and that, more than any revenge, would be his true ruin. The rain started falling on a Wednesday night, thin and persistent, the kind that turned windows into rivers of distorted light. Declan was in his apartment looking at his phone when Aurora's message arrived. Want to come over? I promise I make decent coffee. He knew what that meant. In the 6 weeks since the first kiss, they'd met constantly, dinners, walks, hours, talking about everything, but always in public places. Aurora had never invited him to her apartment, until now. Declan typed his response with slightly trembling fingers. On my way. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building in Wicker Park. Exposed brick walls, wooden floor creaking underfoot, the unmistakable smell of acrylic paint permeating the air. When Aurora opened the door, Declan immediately noticed she was nervous. There was a flush in her cheeks, a restlessness in the way she touched her hair. "Sorry about the mess," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I was painting." The apartment was small but cozy. Paintings covered almost every inch of the walls, some finished, others just sketches. Lit candles created dancing shadows that transformed the space into something almost magical. A large window overlooked the street, where the rain created hypnotic patterns on the glass. "It's perfect," Declan said, and once again he wasn't lying. Aurora smiled, but there was nervousness in her eyes. "Wine? Coffee? I have both." "Wine's good." She disappeared into the tiny kitchen, and Declan took the opportunity to observe the paintings more closely. There was one that caught him, a solitary figure with their back turned, looking at an undefined horizon. Something about the figure's posture conveyed deep loneliness, but also a kind of peaceful acceptance of it. "I painted that one after we met," Aurora said behind him, extending a glass of red wine. Declan turned. "After? It's you, or at least how I imagined you before we met for the first time. Someone alone, but not by choice. Alone because something happened." Her perception was frightening. Declan accepted the glass, his fingers brushing hers. "You're very observant. It comes with the job." She took a sip of her own wine, her eyes not leaving his. "Artists need to see what's hidden. And what else do you see in me?" Aurora moved closer, so close that he could feel the warmth of her body. "Someone who's afraid to be happy. Someone who carries guilt for something they can't forgive." "Rory, I don't need to know now," she interrupted gently. "When you're ready, tell me. But today, I just want to be here with you." She took the glass from his hand, placed it next to hers on a side table, and then stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was different from previous kisses, slower, more intentional. There was a question in that kiss, an unspoken invitation. Declan responded by pulling her closer, her hands at his waist. The kiss deepened, and he felt Aurora tremble slightly against him. When they pulled apart, she was breathless, her cheeks flushed. "I'm scared," she confessed in a low voice. "Of me? Of what I feel for you?" Aurora lowered her eyes. I've never given myself to anyone, Declan. Never trusted enough. Never wanted to." The confession hit Declan like a punch to the stomach. He knew this. He'd investigated every aspect of her life. He knew Aurora had never had serious relationships, that she guarded her intimacy like a precious treasure. And now she was offering it to him, to the man who'd planned to destroy her. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I am ready." Aurora raised her eyes, and there was determination there, mixed with vulnerability. "With you, I'm ready. I'm just afraid of not being enough." "What do you mean?" "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be intimate like that. What if I disappoint you?" Declan held her face in his hands. "You couldn't disappoint me even if you tried." "I love you," Aurora whispered, and the words came out as if she were confessing a sin. "I know it's fast, I know it seems crazy, but I love you, Declan, and that terrifies me." The world stopped. 3 words that changed everything, 3 words that should have been his victory. Confirmation that the plan was working perfectly. But all Declan felt was a piercing pain in his chest. "Rory, You don't have to say it back," she interrupted quickly. "I just needed you to know." No, but Declan kissed her again, this time with desperate urgency, because the truth, the terrible, unexpected truth, was that he loved her too. Somewhere between the first lie and that kiss under the tree, between the coffees and conversations, he'd fallen in love with the woman he was supposed to destroy. Aurora guided him to the bedroom, a small space dominated by a bed covered with simple white sheets, more lit candles, more paintings on the walls. The rain beat against the window with a constant rhythm, creating an intimate soundtrack for what was about to happen. They undressed slowly, each piece of clothing revealing more vulnerability. Aurora trembled, not from cold, but from nervousness and anticipation. When they were just in skin, she crossed her arms over her chest, suddenly shy. "You're beautiful," Declan said, gently moving her arms away. "I'm scared." "Me too." "You, but you've already—" "Never with someone I love," he confessed, and it was true. Melissa had died before they got to that point, and after her, there'd been no one. Just emptiness and revenge. Aurora pulled him to the bed, and what happened next was a slow, hypnotic dance of discoveries. Aurora discovered sensations she didn't know existed. Declan rediscovered what it meant to truly love someone. Each kiss was love and guilt at the same time. When dawn broke, Aurora was nestled in his arms, a soft smile on her lips. Declan stayed awake, watching, for the first time in years, feeling peace, but a peace poisoned by the truth she still didn't know. 1 week. 7 days, since the night Aurora had given herself completely. 7 days, in which Declan Hayes lived in a limbo between two worlds. The world of revenge he'd built for 3 years, and the world of unexpected love that Aurora had created. They saw each other every day. Breakfasts at her apartment, quick lunches between commitments, entire nights talking until dawn. Aurora was radiant, transformed. She laughed easily, touched Declan constantly, small gestures of affection that revealed how much she'd opened up. And with each touch, each smile, Declan's guilt grew like a tumor. It was on a Friday night that everything collapsed. Declan had reserved a table at an elegant Italian restaurant in River North, Osteria Langer, a discreet but sophisticated place with exposed brick walls and candles flickering on each table. He wanted to give Aurora something special, something that would compensate even minimally for the betrayal he carried. She appeared wearing a simple black dress he'd never seen, nothing extravagant, but it highlighted her natural beauty. Hair loose, falling over her shoulders, light makeup, a shy smile on her lips. "You look beautiful," Declan said when she approached the table. "I feel ridiculous," Aurora confessed, sitting down. "I'm not one for places like this." "You deserve places like this. You deserve so much more." Guilt tinged every word. Aurora didn't notice. She picked up the menu, her eyes shining as she read the options. "Everything looks amazing. How do I choose?" "Order what your heart tells you." They ordered wine, appetizers, handmade pasta. Aurora talked animatedly about a new painting she was working on, an urban landscape under a storm, with a single figure standing in the middle of the chaos, serene. "It's about finding peace in the midst of turbulence," she explained. "About you." Declan felt his chest tighten. For a moment, he almost managed to forget, almost managed to believe this was real, that they were just a normal couple at a normal dinner, without lies or destructive secrets. That's when the man approached the table. Tall, impeccable grey suit, hair slicked back with grey, a watch that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. He passed by their table, paused, and came back with an expression of surprise. "Aurora Westwood, what a surprise to find you here." The world stopped. Declan saw the colour drain from Aurora's face, saw her hands tremble as she put her fork back on her plate, saw the panic settling in her eyes. Westwood. The surname fell like a bomb, like lightning striking through everything Declan had tried to ignore. Aurora Westwood, not Rory, the discreet artist. Aurora Westwood, twin sister of Marcus Westwood, daughter of the family that destroyed Melissa. "Mr. Richardson," Aurora said with a tense voice, forcing a smile. "What a coincidence. I didn't even know you were still in Chicago. Your brother mentioned you distanced yourself from the family." The man, Richardson, seemed oblivious to the tension. "How's Marcus, by the way? I heard he has a new venture." Aurora paled even more. I haven't been talking much with him lately. Ah, I see. Well, when you do, give him my regards. Richardson finally noticed Declan sitting across the table. And who's the gentleman? A friend, Aurora responded quickly. Declan, this is Mr. Richardson, an associate of the family. Declan forced himself to shake the extended hand, his mind spinning in collapse. Richardson said a few more empty words before walking away, leaving a devastating silence between them. Aurora couldn't look at Declan. Her hands trembled violently. I can explain, she whispered. Westwood, Declan said, his voice empty. Your last name is Westwood. I was going to tell you. I swear I was. When? The anger began to rise, but it wasn't directed at her. It was against himself. When were you going to tell me you're Marcus Westwood's sister? Aurora raised her eyes, tears beginning to form. How do you know who my brother is? Declan didn't answer. Couldn't. Reality hit him in waves. 3 years of hatred, 3 years waiting for the perfect opportunity. And now she was there, surrendered, in love, vulnerable, exactly as he'd planned. I distanced myself from the family because of him, Aurora continued, desperate, because of the terrible things he did. I don't use the Westwood surname because I'm ashamed of him, Declan. I don't want to be associated. I need to go to the bathroom, Declan interrupted, standing up abruptly. In the small, claustrophobic bathroom, he braced his hands on the marble sink, looking at his own reflection. The man in the mirror was a stranger, eyes bloodshot with anger and pain, jaw tense, heavy breathing. Westwood, 3 years, 3 years of meticulous planning, 3 years investigating, waiting, building the perfect plan. And it had worked. Aurora was completely in love, completely surrendered. He had everything he needed to execute the final revenge, win her heart completely and then shatter it, making Marcus watch helplessly. The thirst for revenge he'd suppressed in recent weeks exploded again. Melissa, 17 people dead. Marcus Westwood getting off scot-free, smiling, while families buried their dead. And Aurora was the key to making him suffer. Declan washed his face with cold water, took 3 deep breaths, and made a decision. He would continue with the plan. When he returned to the table, Aurora was clearly crying. Silent tears streamed down her face, which she tried to hide behind her napkin. I'm sorry, she whispered when he sat down. I should have told you from the beginning, but I was so afraid you'd judge me for my family, for Marcus. It's not your fault what your brother's done, Declan said, his voice controlled. Each word was calculated now, part of the script he'd forgotten, but that came back with devastating clarity. You're not angry. I'm processing. But I'm not angry with you. Aurora let out a trembling sigh of relief. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. They finished dinner in tense silence. Declan drove her home, kissed her at the apartment door with studied tenderness, and promised to call the next day. But when he got home, he locked the door, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark for hours. The perfect revenge was within reach. Aurora was completely in love. He had her heart in the palm of his hand. All he needed to do was continue. Win her over even more, become indispensable, make her depend on him emotionally. Then when she was completely vulnerable, reveal who he really was. The detective who'd pursued Marcus for years, the man whose fiancée died in the accident her brother caused. The man who'd approached her just to destroy her. Marcus's pain watching his sister shattered would be the perfect revenge. But as Declan sat there in the dark, something inside him cracked. Because for the first time in 3 years, he couldn't feel satisfaction in revenge. All he could feel was the memory of Aurora's smile, the way she'd said, I love you, the blind trust in her eyes when she'd surrendered, and he knew with absolute certainty, that destroying her would also destroy him. But the anger was older, the pain was deeper, and Melissa deserved justice. even if it cost his soul, even if it cost Aurora. 2 months, 60 days since the night Declan discovered, or rather confirmed, Aurora's last name. 60 days living a lie so elaborate that sometimes he himself forgot where the farce ended and reality began. Declan Hayes transformed into someone he didn't recognize when he looked in the mirror. Every word to Aurora was measured, every gesture calculated, every promise a lie carefully wrapped in sugar. He was the perfect boyfriend, attentive, romantic, present. And it was all false. Almost all. Aurora blossomed under his attention. The cautious and reserved woman he'd met in the rain had transformed into someone radiant, confident. She smiled more, laughed out loud, touched Declan with a familiarity that spoke of deep intimacy. And every day she surrendered a little more. "Tell me about your work," she asked one Sunday morning as they prepared breakfast together in her apartment. "You never talk about being a consultant. What exactly do you take care of?" Declan flipped the pancakes in the pan, the lie flowing with rehearsed ease. "Companies that need to reorganize departments. It's technical, kind of boring actually. But do you like it? It pays the bills." Aurora observed him with that penetrating look he'd learned to fear. "Sometimes I feel like you're not happy with what you do, like you're trapped in something you didn't choose." Her perception was frightening. Declan forced a smile. "Maybe, but that's talk for after coffee." She didn't insist. She never insisted. Aurora respected his silences, the moments when he closed himself off. She believed he would open up when he was ready. She didn't know that some doors should never be opened. It was on one of those lazy Sundays that Aurora showed Declan the new painting, a large canvas dominating the wall of her small studio. A couple embracing under a storm, thunder in the sky, rain falling violently around them, but the two figures were serene, protected in each other's embrace. "It's us," she said softly, standing beside him before the painting, "no matter the storm outside, because we have each other." Declan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The irony was cruel. He was exactly the storm from which she needed protection. He was the danger, not the refuge. "It's beautiful, Rory," he said, and his voice trembled only slightly. "You think so? I was afraid it was too sentimental." "It's perfect." Aurora turned to him, arms wrapping around his waist, face nestling against his chest. "I love you so much," she whispered. "Sometimes it scares me how much." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've never depended on someone like this. Never let anyone get this deep. And now you're in every part of me. If I lost you—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Declan already knew how that sentence would end, and the guilt was a crushing weight in his chest. In the following weeks, Declan intensified the plan. He became even more present, more necessary. He helped Aurora with bills, showed up when she needed something, was always available. Slowly, methodically, he became indispensable in her life. And then, on a cold December night, with the year's first snow falling softly over Chicago, Declan made the decision he knew would be the final nail in the coffin. They were at Navy Pier, looking at the frozen Lake Michigan, the city lights reflecting on the dark surface of the water. Aurora was nestled in his coat, shivering slightly in the cold, but refusing to leave. "5 more minutes," she begged. "It's so beautiful here." Declan watched her, her face illuminated by the lights, snowflakes catching in her dark hair, eyes shining with simple happiness, and for a moment, a single moment of weakness. He almost gave up everything, almost confessed right there, in the snow, who he really was. But then he saw Melissa. Not literally, but in his mind, her face in the morgue, cold and lifeless, because a rich man decided he was above consequences. And the anger returned, cold and precise. "Marry me," Declan said. Aurora froze. Slowly she turned to look at him, eyes wide with shock. "What?" Declan didn't have a ring, hadn't planned this, but suddenly it seemed like the perfect move, the final blow before the fall. He knelt right there, in the wet snow, and held her hands. "Marry me, Aurora. I know it's fast, I know it seems crazy, but I don't want one more day without you. Marry me." Immediate tears. Aurora covered her mouth with her hands, trembling, not from cold, but from pure emotion. "Declan, you don't have to answer now. I know it's a lot." "Yes," she interrupted, falling to her knees in the snow beside him. "Yes, yes, yes." Declan pulled her into an embrace, and Aurora cried against his shoulder, sobs of happiness that broke his heart. People around them applauded, strangers happy for the romantic scene. No one knew the truth. "I love you so much," Aurora whispered between tears. "I'm going to make you happy, I promise." "I'll be the best wife." "You already make me happy," Declan lied, stroking her hair. In the following days, Aurora was euphoric. She told her cousin Jade, the few friends she had, showing off her left hand even without a ring yet. "He's going to take me to choose one," she explained, radiant. "But I don't even need a ring. I just need him." Declan bought the ring a week later. Nothing extravagant, because Aurora wasn't like that, but beautiful enough. A small diamond in simple white gold. When he put it on her finger, Aurora cried again. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect." But Declan knew the truth. He wasn't perfect. He was a monster disguised as a prince, charming, and the house of cards he'd built was about to collapse, taking Aurora with it. The plan was complete now. Aurora was completely emotionally dependent. She believed he was the love of her life, that they would build a future together. She trusted him blindly, without reservations. And that was exactly what Declan needed. Soon, very soon, he would reveal who he really was. The detective who'd pursued Marcus Westwood for years. The man whose fiancé died in the accident her brother caused. The man who'd approached her with a single purpose, destroy her as revenge. He imagined the scene 1,000 times. Aurora's eyes when she understood, the way she would shatter. And Marcus being forced to watch the sister he loved crumbling, unable to protect her, exactly as Declan had been unable to protect Melissa. The perfect revenge. But every night, when Aurora slept, nestled in his arms, whispering, "I love you," even in dreams, something inside Declan cracked a little more, because he knew, even if he didn't admit it out loud, that destroying Aurora would also destroy him. And maybe that was exactly what he deserved. The idea came to Aurora on a Thursday morning, as she prepared coffee and watched the snow fall lazily through the window. Declan had left early. "Important meeting with a client," he'd said, kissing her quickly before disappearing through the door. But she knew he'd been working too hard, seemed tense, and she wanted to do something special. Surprise? She'd bring him breakfast at work. Aurora stopped by the French bakery Declan loved, bought croissants still warm, chocolate bread, espresso in thermal cups. She also bought a small bouquet of flowers, sunflowers, because he'd mentioned once that he liked their light. Simple, but made with love. She had the address. Declan had given it when they filled out papers for the apartment they planned to rent together after the wedding. "In case of emergency," he'd said. She'd never been there. She respected his workspace, the boundaries he established. But today would be different. Today would be a romantic surprise. The 18th District Police Station was a building of grey bricks and small windows, the kind of construction that looked more like a fortress than a workplace. Aurora hesitated at the entrance, adjusting the bag with the croissants. Maybe she should have called first. But no, it was a surprise. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with grey hair pulled back in a bun, looked at Aurora with a tired expression. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Declan Hayes. He works here." The woman frowned. "Detective Hayes?" "Detective." The word echoed strangely. Aurora forced a smile. Of course, consultant was probably a generic term. Maybe he worked as a consultant for the police. Yes. Where can I find him? Third floor, but he's in a meeting. That's okay, I'll wait. Aurora was already walking toward the stairs. The third floor smelled of old coffee and paper, narrow corridors, wooden doors with identification plaques, the muffled sound of voices and phones ringing. Aurora followed the numbers until she found the room indicated by the receptionist. The door was ajar, and that's when she heard, "Detective, we can't delay Marcus Westwood's arrest any longer." Male voice, firm, authoritative. "The evidence is solid. We have witness testimony, bank records showing fraud, everything we need." Aurora froze. Marcus, they were talking about Marcus. "One more week." It was Declan's voice, but there was a tension in it that Aurora had never heard. "I just need one more week." "Why? The guy's guilty. We know he's using shell companies to launder money. We know about the corruption. Every day that passes is another chance for him to escape. I'm protecting someone else." "What someone else?" Silence. Aurora held the bag tighter, her heart beginning to beat erratically. His sister, Aurora Westwood. She has nothing to do with her brother's crimes. Aurora felt the world tilt. Her name. Declan had just said her name, her full name. "So what?" the other voice responded. "She'll have to deal with the consequences. She's going to suffer when she finds out who I am." Declan's voice was loaded with something Aurora couldn't identify. Guilt? Fear? She doesn't know I'm a detective. She doesn't know I approached her for revenge. The bag slipped from Aurora's hands. The crash of breaking glass, coffee spilling, croissants scattering across the corridor floor made the door open completely. Declan appeared in the doorway, and when he saw Aurora standing there, pale, trembling, eyes wide with shock, his face went white as paper. "Detective Hayes," Aurora whispered, and her own voice sounded distant, as if coming from far away. "You're a detective. Revenge. You said revenge." "Rory, I can explain." "Don't call me that!" The scream came out before she could control it. Staff began appearing in office doorways, curious. You lied. About everything." Declan took a step toward her, hands extended. "Please let me explain." "Explain what?" Aurora backed away, tears already beginning to flow. "That you approached me on purpose, that everything was planned. Consultant. You said you were a consultant. I'm a detective for 12 years. And you lied," Aurora was shouting now, not caring about the people watching. "About who you are, what you do, about everything. Why? Why would you do this?" The other man, older, with grey hair and a hard expression, appeared behind Declan. "Maybe it would be better if you talked in private." "No!" Aurora pointed a trembling finger at Declan. "Revenge. You said revenge." "Revenge for what? For my brother?" Declan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a pain so deep it almost made her waver. Almost. 3 years ago, he began, his voice hoarse, Marcus was driving drunk and collided with a bus. 17 people died. One of them was my fiancée, Melissa. The floor disappeared beneath Aurora's feet. The accident. She remembered. Of course she remembered. It had been the reason she'd completely distanced herself from the family. The last straw. Marcus had killed innocent people and gotten off practically scot-free. "You knew," she whispered, "from the beginning. You knew who I was." "Yes. That day in the rain, when we bumped into each other, it was on purpose." "Yes. Everything, every conversation, every meeting, every—" Her voice failed. "Every time you touched me, every time you kissed me, when I gave myself to you." Aurora covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I was a virgin. I'd never... And you knew. You knew and didn't care." "I cared." "Liar!" Aurora lunged forward, pushing his chest with both hands. Declan didn't resist. "Everything you said was a lie. You used me." For what? To get revenge on my brother? To hurt me because he hurt you? At first, yes. Declan tried to hold her arms, but Aurora pulled away violently. But then I fell in love for real. Everything changed. When? When did it change? Aurora screamed through tears. After we slept together? After I said I loved you? After I agreed to marry you? When, Declan? When did you decide I deserved to know the truth? Declan had no answer. There was no possible answer. Aurora looked at her left hand, at the ring she wore with such pride. Slowly, she took it off. The small diamond sparkled under the corridor's fluorescent lights. "Take it," she said, extending the ring. "You can return it, or sell it, or throw it in the trash. I don't care." "Rory, please." "My name is Aurora." She threw the ring on the floor, where it rolled and stopped near the crushed croissants and spilled coffee. "Aurora Westwood, the woman you planned to destroy. Congratulations, detective. You succeeded. I'm destroyed." Aurora turned to leave, but stopped. She turned again, and there was something worse than anger on her face. There was disappointment, deep and absolute pain. "I loved you," she whispered. "Truly, completely. I gave myself to you in a way I'd never done with anyone. And you used me as a piece in your revenge game. It wasn't a game. I love you." "You don't know what love is," Aurora said, her voice breaking. "You're incapable of loving anything beyond your own pain." And then she left, running through the corridors, down the stairs, leaving behind the spilled coffee, the crushed croissants, the forgotten ring, and the man who'd destroyed her. Declan stood there, surrounded by colleagues who pretended not to be listening, looking at the ring on the floor. The older man, Captain Morrison, placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You knew this was going to happen eventually," he said, without judgment in his voice. "I know," Declan whispered. "And now?" Declan bent down, picked up the ring from the floor. It was covered in coffee, but the diamond still sparkled. "Now I live with the consequences." But as he closed his hand around the ring, Declan knew it wasn't that simple, because for the first time in 3 years, the revenge had been completed, and all he felt was emptiness. 3 weeks, 21 days since Aurora discovered the truth. 21 days since both their worlds collapsed. Declan's apartment looked like a mausoleum. Closed curtains blocked any trace of natural light, transforming day into perpetual night. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, delivery boxes scattered on the coffee table, empty bottles lined up on the kitchen counter, unshaven, disheveled hair, deep dark circles carved under his eyes. Declan Hayes was a shadow of the man he used to be. He spent his days on the couch, staring at nothing. Sometimes he turned on the TV, but the sound was just white noise. Sometimes he opened his work laptop, but the words on the screen made no sense. Most of the time, he just sat there, trapped in an infinite loop of memories. Aurora laughing, Aurora painting, Aurora saying, "I love you," for the first time. Her blouse was still hanging on the bedroom chair. A simple sea-green blouse she'd forgotten on one of the nights they spent together. Declan had picked it up the day after the discovery, when he returned home from the station, and since then couldn't let go of it. He slept hugging the blouse, his face buried in the fabric that still held the faint scent of paint and floral perfume. Pathetic. He knew, but he couldn't stop. Captain Morrison called daily. "Hayes, you need to come back to work. It's been 3 weeks. I understand you're going through something difficult, but—" "1 more week," Declan always responded with a dead voice. "I just need 1 more week." But both knew 1 week wouldn't be enough. A month wouldn't be enough. Maybe nothing would be enough. Marcus Westwood had been arrested. Declan's partner, Detective Rivera, had executed the order even without his approval. The headlines screamed justice. Corrupt businessman arrested. Money laundering scheme dismantled. Marcus Westwood faces decades behind bars. Declan should be celebrating. 3 years pursuing that man, 3 years building the case, and finally, Marcus would pay for his crimes, for Melissa's death, for the 17 destroyed lives, for the corruption, for the arrogance, for believing he was above the law. But Declan didn't feel victory. He felt only devastating emptiness, because the price of justice had been Aurora. On the other side of town, in Cousin Jade's apartment in Lincoln Park, Aurora Westwood was equally destroyed. She slept on the couch. She couldn't stay in her own apartment anymore, where every corner held memories of Declan, the kitchen where they prepared coffee together, the bedroom where she'd given herself for the first time, the studio where she'd painted the picture of them under the storm. Everything contaminated, everything poisoned by lies. Jade tried to help. She made tea, offered food Aurora barely touched, sat beside her in understanding silences, but there were no words of comfort for the kind of betrayal Aurora had suffered. "You need to eat something," Jade said gently, placing a plate of toast in front of her. "You've lost so much weight." Aurora looked at the food without interest. Her body had become strange, prominent bones where there had been soft curves, deep dark circles, lifeless hair. She'd stopped painting, couldn't. Every time she picked up a brush, she saw Declan's hands guiding hers, heard his voice saying her paintings were beautiful, all lies. "He called again," Jade mentioned carefully one morning. "12th time today." "Block the number." "I already did. He's using different phones." Aurora closed her eyes. Even after everything, Declan's voice still had power over her. In the first week, she'd answered once, a moment of weakness at 3 in the morning when loneliness was unbearable. He was crying on the other end of the line, begging for a chance to explain. "There's nothing to explain," Aurora had said, her own voice empty. "You used me, planned to destroy me. You succeeded. The end. I love you." She'd hung up, hadn't answered since then. The news about Marcus filled the papers. Aurora knew she should feel something, anger, satisfaction, sadness, but she was so numb she couldn't feel anything. Marcus was guilty, he always had been, and part of her, a small, distant part, was relieved he would finally pay. But the cost. "He destroyed you," Jade had said one night, holding Aurora's hand while she cried silently. "But you're going to survive. You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong. No one does when they're broken. But you'll glue the pieces back together. Maybe not the same way, but you will." Aurora wanted to believe, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Declan. His smile, the way he looked at her, how he touched her face with such tenderness. And then she remembered it was all performance. Every gesture calculated, every word measured. The virginity she'd given him, that night under candles when she'd surrendered completely, believing she was safe, believing she was loved. He knew. The whole time, he knew who she was. And he didn't care. The humiliation was almost worse than the pain. Back in Declan's apartment, the phone rang. He ignored it, as he ignored all phone calls. But then the voicemail arrived, and Marcus Westwood's voice filled the dead silence. "Detective Hayes, I know you probably won't call back, but you need to hear this. You destroyed my sister, the only pure person left in my family. She had nothing to do with my crimes, but you used her anyway. For revenge. Congratulations, you hit me where it hurts most. But you know what's funny? You also destroyed yourself in the process. I bet you didn't plan that, did you? I hope it was worth it." The call ended. Declan threw the phone against the wall, where it shattered into pieces. But Marcus's voice echoed in his head, because he was right. The revenge had been achieved. Marcus was imprisoned, suffering, helpless, while the sister he loved shattered. Exactly as Declan had planned. And it wasn't worth it. Not at all. Because Aurora wasn't just the means to revenge. She'd become everything. And now she was destroyed, and Declan was responsible. Melissa would have hated what he'd become. The gentle, compassionate woman who'd planned to marry him would never approve of using an innocent as a weapon. She would have been horrified. And suddenly, Declan realized the cruel truth. The revenge hadn't honored Melissa's memory. It had only tarnished it. He'd brought Aurora into the darkness that consumed his life, turned something pure and genuine into ashes. And for what? To make Marcus suffer. Marcus would suffer anyway in prison. The evidence was solid. Justice would be done. But Aurora would never recover from what he'd done. And neither would he. That night, for the first time in weeks, Declan cried for real. Not silent tears, but violent sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for Melissa. He cried for Aurora. He cried for the monster he'd become. And when the tears finally dried, he made a decision. He needed to fix this. Somehow, he needed to fix what he'd broken, even if it was impossible, even if she never forgave him. He owed it to Aurora, and more importantly, he owed it to himself. The return to work was brutal. Declan dragged himself back to the station on a cold Monday in January, shaven, but with eyes that revealed nights without proper sleep. Colleagues greeted him with brief nods, avoiding questions. Everyone knew. Gossip spread fast in small environments. Captain Morrison called him to the office. "Welcome back, Hayes. Are you sure you're ready?" "I need to be," Declan responded simply. "Right. We have a new case, insurance fraud in Wicker Park. Nothing too complex, but we need to verify some witnesses." Simple work. Routine. Exactly what Declan needed to not think, not feel. It was during one of these routine checks, on a grey and unremarkable Tuesday, that it happened. Declan entered the medical clinic on West Division Street, investigating a suspect who claimed to have suffered an accident that was clearly fraudulent. He showed his badge at reception, asked about patient records, was following standard protocol when a nurse hurried past, pushing a gurney. And there, pale as death, with an IV in her arm and eyes closed, was Aurora. The world stopped. Declan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. For one terrible second, he thought she was dead, the extreme pallor, the stillness. But then he saw her chest rise and fall, breathing weak but present. "What happened to her?" Declan asked, already following the gurney, the fraud case completely forgotten. "Sir, you can't—" "I'm a detective, and I know her." "What happened?" The nurse hesitated, but something in his urgency made her answer. "Severe dehydration. Passed out on the street. A passerby called emergency. She's stable but needed immediate hydration. Severe dehydration." Declan felt guilt like acid burning through his veins. This was his fault. Everything was his fault. The nurse took Aurora to an observation room, a small space separated by curtains, with just a gurney and basic medical equipment. Declan stood at the entrance, unable to go in, but unable to leave. That's when Aurora's eyes opened. For a moment, she just looked at the ceiling, disoriented. Then her gaze slid to the side and found Declan standing there, and all the remaining colour drained from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. Rory, get out!" Aurora tried to sit up, but was too weak. The movement made the IV stand sway dangerously. "Get out of here!" The nurse entered quickly. "Ma'am, please stay calm. I want him out, now!" Declan raised his hands in surrender. I'm going. I just wanted to know if you were okay." "Do I look okay to you?" Aurora screamed, and her voice was destroyed, hoarse, broken. Tears began to stream down. "Look what you did to me." And Declan looked, really looked. Aurora was a shadow. She'd lost at least 20 pounds, maybe more. Prominent cheekbones, deep dark circles like wounds, lifeless hair falling over thin shoulders. Her hands, those hands that created art, trembled weakly where they rested on the sheet. "My God," he whispered. "Go away," Aurora said, weaker now, turning her face to the wall. "Please, if you ever felt anything for me, go away." The nurse touched Declan's arm. "Sir, it would be better." "I know." He backed away, but stopped at the door. "Aurora." She didn't turn, didn't respond. "I'm sorry, more than you'll ever know. And I know apologies mean nothing, but I love you. I fell in love for real, and I couldn't keep hurting you. That's why I cancelled Marcus's arrest order. For you." Silence. Then slowly, Aurora turned her head. There was something different in her look, not just anger, but painful curiosity. "What?" "I told my captain to wait. I tried to stop Marcus's arrest because I knew it would hurt you. Rivera executed the order without my approval, but I tried to stop it. For you." Aurora studied him for a long moment. Something wavered in her eyes, a crack in the armor of anger. But then her expression hardened again. "Too late," she said, voice empty. "If you really loved me, you would have told me the truth from the beginning. You would have given me a choice, but you didn't. You took everything from me, my trust, my innocence, my ability to believe someone could love me without ulterior motives. I can fix them, you can't. Some things, when broken, don't glue back together." Aurora closed her eyes, tears streaming silently. "Go away, Declan. At least give me that. Leave me alone." Declan wanted to protest, wanted to kneel beside the gurney and beg for forgiveness, wanted to promise he'd spend the rest of his life making it up, that he'd do anything to bring her back. But he'd already taken so much from her. He couldn't also take her peace. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll go, but Aurora, I hope one day you find someone who deserves you. Someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. Without lies, without ulterior motives, just pure love. Like what I thought I had with you," she whispered bitterly. The pain of those words almost knocked him down, but Declan just nodded, memorizing her face one last time, and then left. In the corridor, he leaned against the wall, his legs trembling. The nurse passed by him, casting a pitying look. "Will she be okay?" he asked. "Physically, yes. Emotionally." The nurse shrugged. "That takes time. And honestly, sir, whatever happened between you two, I think it's best if you really do leave her alone. She needs to heal." Declan knew she was right. Aurora needed space, time, peace, things he couldn't give while he was around. But as he left the clinic back to the cold Chicago street, one truth crystallized in his mind. He couldn't just give up. Not like this. Not with Aurora destroyed because of him. There was one person who could help. One person who knew Aurora better than anyone, who genuinely loved her. And although the idea filled him with dread, Declan knew what he needed to do. He needed to face Marcus Westwood, not as a detective, not as an enemy, as the man who destroyed his sister and now needed to find a way to fix it, even if it cost everything. Stateville State Penitentiary was 40 miles southwest of Chicago, a fortress of concrete and barbed wire that housed some of the state's most dangerous criminals. Declan Hayes never imagined he'd one day voluntarily drive there to have a conversation with the man he'd hated for 3 years. But there he was, on a freezing Thursday in February, passing through metal detectors, surrendering his badge and gun, being escorted through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and despair. "Room 3, the guard said, opening a heavy metal door. 15 minutes. The visitation room was small and claustrophobic. Grey walls, metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs equally bolted. A small high window let in only a thread of natural light. Declan sat down, hands clasped on the table, heart beating erratically. The door on the other side opened, and Marcus Westwood entered. 3 years. 3 years since Declan had seen him in court, smiling discreetly while receiving a ridiculous sentence for killing 17 people. But the man who entered the room was different. The orange prison uniform replaced the expensive Italian suits. The hair, once perfectly styled, was longer and disheveled. There was a hardness in his eyes that didn't exist before. Or perhaps it had always existed, just more visible now. Marcus sat down slowly, studying Declan with clinical interest. "Detective Hayes," he finally said, voice calm but loaded with venom, "I must say this is a surprise. Did you come to receive my confession of victory?" Declan held his gaze. "I came to talk about Aurora." The mention of the name made something flicker in Marcus's expression. "My sister, the only innocent person in this whole mess. What do you want with her now? Haven't you destroyed enough?" "I know what I did." "Do you?" Marcus leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Do you really? Do you know she stopped painting, that she can barely get out of bed, that she's lost so much weight that Jade is considering forced hospitalization? Do you know what you did?" Each word was a knife. Declan forced himself not to look away. "Yes, I know, and I came here because I need to fix it." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Fix? How do you fix having destroyed someone's trust? How do you fix having used her virginity as a weapon? How do you fix having made her believe she was loved when it was all cold, calculated revenge?" "I fell in love with her," Declan said, voice low but firm. "I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but I fell in love for real. And that should matter to me because you love her too. And I know that despite everything you've done, despite all your crimes, you truly care about Aurora. It's the only human thing left in you." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, there was less anger and more weariness. "She was the only pure thing in our family. After our mother died, I made bad decisions. I let anger consume me, built an empire on corruption and lies. But Aurora, she chose a different path, stayed good, kind, despite everything. And I admired her for that, even though I couldn't be like that." "She distanced herself from you because of the accident," Declan said, "because of the 17 people you killed." "I know." Marcus lowered his eyes. "And she was right to do it. I didn't deserve her love. But she loved me anyway, you know. Even from afar, even hating me, she still cared. And you used her. Used her goodness as a weapon against me. Yes, and it was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Worse than letting your fiancé die?" The cruelty of the comment should have enraged Declan, but he just nodded. "Yes, because Melissa died because of your choices, but Aurora is suffering because of mine." Marcus studied him with new attention. "You really love her, don't you? It's not performance. You really fell in love with my sister." "Yes. And now, what do you want from me?" Declan took a deep breath. "Help. You know Aurora better than anyone. You know how she thinks, how she feels. I need to know how to fix this, how to earn her forgiveness." Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You broke my sister, Hayes, the only pure person left in my rotten family, and now you want me to help you win her back. Why the hell would I do that? Because she's suffering and I can help her heal if you give me a chance. Or you could hurt her even more." "I won't." "How do I know?" Marcus interrupted. "How do I know this isn't another game? Another manipulation?" Declan held Marcus's gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took something from his pocket. The engagement ring, the small diamond in white gold that Aurora had thrown on the station floor. He placed it on the table between them. "I've carried this with me every day since she left me," Declan said quietly, "as a reminder of what I lost, of what I destroyed. If I just wanted to hurt her, I would have moved on weeks ago, but I can't. I wake up thinking about her. I sleep dreaming about her, and when I saw her at the clinic so fragile, so broken, I knew I'd rather die than see her suffer more." Marcus looked at the ring, and something softened in his expression. "Aurora was always a romantic, believed in true love, in happy endings, and you destroyed that in her." "I know." "Then let me make a counter-proposal, Detective." Marcus leaned forward again, eyes fixed on Declan's. You're going to tell her the whole truth. Every sordid detail of your plan, every lie you told, every moment you manipulated, everything. She already knows. No, she doesn't. She knows the basics, that you approached her for revenge, but she doesn't know the depth. The 3 months of surveillance before you bumped into her, the photos you took without permission, every meticulously architected lie. You're going to tell her everything, and it's going to hurt. It'll probably destroy her even more. Then why? Because she needs closure, Marcus said firmly. She needs to know exactly what happened so she can process and eventually move on. And you need to carry the full weight of what you did. No excuses, no softening, complete and brutal truth. And then? Then you disappear from her life, transfer to another state, another district, I don't care, but you leave Chicago and never come back. In exchange, I promise to protect her from any consequences of my actions. Jade is receiving pressure from investigators asking about Aurora. I'll make sure everyone knows she had no involvement. I'll keep her safe. You want me to confess everything and then abandon her forever? Yes. That's the price of your love, detective. The complete truth and her freedom from you. Declan felt as if he were being torn apart. Telling Aurora every detail of the plan, showing exactly how calculated the manipulation was, would hurt her deeply. And then abandoning her, leaving Chicago, never seeing her again. But Marcus was right. Aurora deserved the truth, deserved closure, and deserved the chance to heal away from the man who destroyed her. "Okay," Declan said finally, voice hoarse. "I accept." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we have a deal. You have 3 days. After that, I expect you to be on your way to Washington or Boston or wherever the hell you can get a transfer. 3 days. Marcus stood up, signaling the conversation was over. But before leaving, he paused. "Hayes, yes? If you really love her, you'll let her go. Because sometimes loving someone means recognizing you're exactly the person they need to get away from." And with that, Marcus Westwood left, leaving Declan alone in the grey room with the engagement ring and the crushing weight of what he needed to do. 3 days. 3 days to completely destroy Aurora before freeing her forever. 3 days. 72 hours to gather enough courage to do what needed to be done. Declan spent every minute of that time preparing, not a speech, but evidence. Concrete proof of the depth of his betrayal. He compiled everything in a large yellow envelope, photos he'd taken of Aurora before they approached each other, taken from afar with a telescopic lens. Aurora leaving the bookstore, Aurora painting in the park, Aurora buying coffee. Detailed notes about her habits, schedules, the places she frequented. Transcripts of conversations he'd memorized and later recorded. The original plan, handwritten 3 years before, detailing exactly how he would destroy Marcus Westwood's sister. Each page was a confession. Each photo was evidence of the monster he'd become. On the 3rd day, a rainy Sunday that perfectly mirrored the day they met, Declan drove to Jade's apartment. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. The envelope sat in the passenger seat, heavy as lead. Jade answered the door, and the look she gave Declan could have melted steel. "You have nerve. I know, and I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm here to talk to Aurora. 5 minutes, that's all I ask. She doesn't want to see you. I know, but she needs to hear this. Please." Jade studied him for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, she opened the door. 5 minutes. And if she asks you to leave, you leave immediately. Promised. Aurora was on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the heater being on. She looked a bit better than at the clinic, no longer dehydrated at least, but still frighteningly thin. When she saw Declan, her entire body stiffened. "No," she said immediately. "Jade, I said I didn't want—" "I know," Declan interrupted, already kneeling on the floor at a safe distance from her. "And I'm leaving soon. But first you need to know everything, everything. Because you deserve the complete truth. I already know the truth. You don't. Declan placed the envelope on the floor between them. You know I approached you for revenge, but you don't know exactly how far it went. And you need to know, Aurora. Not because it'll make you feel better, it won't, but because you deserve closure. You deserve to know exactly what you were up against from the beginning. Aurora looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. What is that? Proof. Of everything. With trembling hands, she picked up the envelope and opened it. The first photo that fell out was of herself, leaving the bookstore 3 months before they officially met. Aurora held it with violently trembling fingers. You photographed me? For 3 months before bumping into you in the rain, I followed you, studied your routine. I knew exactly where you'd be, what day, what time. That encounter wasn't coincidence. It was surgically planned. Aurora pulled out more papers, detailed notes. Tuesdays, 6:20 p.m., leaves Rush Street bookstore, always buys coffee first, never carries an umbrella. Every detail of her life, catalogued as if she were a military target. Stop! Aurora screamed, throwing the papers away. Tears were already streaming down her face. I don't want to see more. You need to, Declan said, his own voice breaking. You need to know that I knew you were a virgin before we slept together. I knew you'd never trusted anyone. I knew exactly where to hit you to cause maximum damage, and I did all this consciously, coldly, because I wanted Marcus to suffer watching you destroyed. Please stop. Aurora was sobbing now, her whole body trembling. The breakfast you brought me at the station, Declan continued, relentless. I knew you'd do that. I'd planned to leave the door ajar exactly so you'd overhear. It wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. Stop! Aurora screamed. You're doing this on purpose. You're hurting me again. Yes, Declan confessed, tears now streaming down his own face too, because you need complete closure. You need to know the monster I was, not that I am, but that I was. Because somewhere between the first kiss and the marriage proposal, something changed. I fell in love for real. And when I discovered your last name at that restaurant, I tried to cancel everything. I tried to stop Marcus's arrest for you. You already said that, but I didn't say why. Declan crawled closer, stopping when Aurora recoiled. Because you became more important than revenge, more important than the pain I'd carried for 3 years, more important than justice for Melissa. You became the most important thing in my life, and that terrified me because it wasn't in the plan. Aurora stared at him through tears, confusion and pain fighting on her face. How can I believe anything you say? You can't, Declan admitted. And that's why I'm leaving. Silence. Aurora blinked, processing. What? Transfer to Washington, D.C. It's already approved. I'm leaving Chicago tomorrow, forever. You'll never have to see me again, never have to worry about running into me on the street or hearing about me. I disappear from your life completely. You're leaving? It's what you want, isn't it? It's what you need. Aurora looked at the scattered photos, at the notes, at the physical evidence of the manipulation she'd suffered. Then she looked at Declan, really looked, for the first time since the station, and she saw a shattered man, not the confident, calculating detective, not the charming, attentive boyfriend, but a genuinely destroyed man, carrying guilt that was clearly consuming him alive. You really love me, she whispered, more to herself than to him. It's not performance. You really... Yes, Declan said simply, more than I thought it was possible to love someone again. And that's why I need to leave, because you looking at me hurts you. And I'd rather live the rest of my life without you than be the constant source of your pain. Aurora closed her eyes, silent tears streaming. When she opened them again, there was something different there. Not forgiveness exactly, but a painful understanding. You know what hurts most? She asked quietly. It's that I believe you. I believe you regretted it. I believe you love me, but it doesn't matter, because every time I look at you I see two people, the man I fell in love with and the man who planned to destroy me, and I can't separate the two. I know. Every time I remember the first time we made love, I also remember that you knew who I was, that you were using that intimacy as a weapon. I know. How do I trust you again? How do I trust anyone again? Declan had no answer. There was no possible answer. Aurora picked up the engagement ring that Declan had placed on the table when he arrived. She turned it between her fingers, light catching the small diamond. "You swore on Melissa's memory," she said finally. "When you proposed, you swore you'd never lie again. And I kept that promise. Since that night, every word I've said to you has been true. But the previous lies poisoned everything." Yes. Aurora was silent for so long that Declan thought she was done. He started to stand up, ready to leave her life forever when she spoke again. "Don't go to Washington." Declan froze. "What?" "I don't know if I can forgive. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you without seeing the betrayal. But—" She took a deep breath, trembling. "But if you leave now, I'll never know. I'll never know if the love I felt was real or illusion, and that will haunt me forever." "Rory, you don't have to—" "Let's try," she said, and the words came out as if she were tearing them from her soul, slowly, with brutal honesty. "No promises, but let's try, because despite everything, despite the pain and betrayal and hatred I should feel, I still love you, and that terrifies me more than anything." Declan felt as if he couldn't breathe. "Are you sure?" "No, I'm not sure of anything, but I choose to risk it. I choose to believe that people can change, that love can survive even the worst storms." Aurora held the ring tighter. "But if you lie to me again, even once, it's over. No second chances." "Never again," Declan swore, falling to his knees again. "On Melissa's memory, on your trust, on everything sacred, I'll never lie to you again." Aurora nodded, tears still streaming. "Then stay and help me heal, help me trust again." And there, surrounded by the wreckage of betrayal, by the scattered papers that documented the worst version of Declan Hayes, two broken hearts made an impossible choice. Try again, risk again, love again. That same night, Declan returned to Stateville State Penitentiary. Marcus received him with a surprised expression. He wasn't expecting to see him so soon. "Did you tell her everything already?" Marcus asked as soon as he sat down. "Yes, every sordid detail, every lie, every manipulation." Declan paused, holding Marcus's gaze. "But I'm not going to Washington." Marcus's face immediately hardened. "That was the deal." "She asked me to stay," Declan interrupted. "Aurora gave me a second chance, and I'm not going to waste it by fulfilling a deal I made when I still believed I didn't deserve forgiveness." "You don't deserve it," Marcus growled. "Maybe not, probably not, but she decided to give me a chance anyway. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that chance wasn't in vain." Declan leaned forward. "As for protecting her from investigations about your crimes, I still expect you to keep that part. Not for me, for her." Marcus was silent for a long moment, studying Declan with intensity. Finally, he sighed. "Aurora was always stubborn, too kind for her own good. If she chose to give you a second chance, who am I to interfere?" He pointed a threatening finger. "But if you hurt her again, Hayes, deal or no deal, there won't be a place in this world where you can hide from me." "Fair enough," Declan said simply. "And for the record, I'm not going to hurt her again. I'd rather die." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then go. Take care of my sister the way I never could. And Hayes, thank you for loving her enough to admit the complete truth." When Declan left the prison that night, the weight on his shoulders was different. Not lighter. The guilt was still there, always would be, but now there was also hope. Aurora had chosen to risk it, and he wouldn't let her regret it. 6 months. 182 days since Aurora had made the scariest choice of her life, giving Declan Hayes a second chance. The first months were brutal. There was no romance in rebuilding trust, just hard and painful work. Therapy sessions, individual for both, and gradually, couples therapy. Difficult conversations that lasted until dawn. Moments when Aurora looked at him and only saw betrayal, and needed to leave the room to breathe. Days when Declan carried so much guilt he could barely speak. But slowly, like a plant growing through cracked concrete, something began to change. Aurora started painting again, first just meaningless scribbles, then shapes, eventually complete works. The canvases were different now, darker, more complex, with layers of meaning that didn't exist before. Pain transformed into art. Trauma turned into beauty. Declan left the police station. He couldn't be a detective anymore. The profession was too tainted by lies. Instead, he started working at a non-profit organization that helped families of traffic accident victims, turning his own pain into something useful, something that truly honored Melissa's memory. They didn't live together immediately. Aurora needed space, independence, proof that she could exist without him before choosing to be with him. Declan respected that, showing up only when invited, responding to messages without pressure, proving day after day that his actions matched his words. And gradually, so gradually, it was almost imperceptible, trust began to return. A hand touch that wasn't flinched away from. A kiss that didn't carry the weight of betrayal, an entire night sleeping, nestled together without nightmares. It wasn't perfect, probably never would be, but it was real, honest, built on truth instead of lies. They didn't forget. The scars were still there, always would be, but scars were proof of healing, not continuing damage. 6 months and 15 days after that afternoon at Jade's house, on a sunny Sunday morning that seemed almost absurdly cheerful, Aurora woke up with a strange feeling, mild nausea, dizziness, something different in her body she couldn't identify. She and Declan had finally rented an apartment together 3 weeks earlier, small, modest, in Wicker Park, not far from where she used to live. The walls were covered with her paintings. The bookshelf filled with books they both loved. The kitchen stained with splatters from cooking attempts that often ended in pizza delivery and laughter. It was home. Finally, genuinely, home. Aurora got out of bed carefully so as not to wake Declan. He was still sleeping, his face relaxed in a way it rarely was when awake. She walked to the bathroom, and that's where the suspicion crystallized. 3 tests, 3 pink lines confirming the impossible. Pregnant. Aurora sat on the cold bathroom floor for long minutes, the tests lined up on the sink edge, processing. A baby, life growing inside her. After everything, after the betrayal, the pain, the slow and painful rebuilding, life. Tears began to flow, but not from sadness, from something more complex, fear, joy, wonder, gratitude. Rory! Declan's voice from the other side of the door, worried. "Are you okay?" Aurora opened the door, and he was standing there, hair messy from sleep, wearing only pajama pants, eyes immediately scanning her for signs of trouble. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. His face paled. "What? Are you sick? Do you need to go to the hospital?" "No, it's not that." Aurora picked up one of the tests, holding it with both hands. "Declan, I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Declan looked at the test, then at her, then at the test again. His mouth opened, closed, no sound coming out. And then, slowly, his knees gave way. He fell to his knees right there in the hallway, hands covering his face, and began to cry. Aurora knelt beside him, worried. "Declan, talk to me. You don't want it?" "No," he managed to say through sobs. "It's not that. It's just—" He raised his face, and there was so much emotion there it almost hurt to look. "After everything I did, after all the pain I caused. You're giving me this. Life, future, a family. Aurora held his face in her hands. We're creating this together. It's not a gift I'm giving you. It's something we're building. I don't deserve— Stop that, she said firmly. You didn't deserve a second chance, and yet I gave it. And every day since then, you've proven that choice was right. You changed, Declan. Really changed. And this baby— She placed her hand over her own still flat belly. This baby is going to grow up, knowing only the good version of you. The true version. Declan placed his hand over hers, both resting on where a tiny life was beginning to form. I promise, he whispered, I'll be the father this child deserves. I'll be the man you deserve. You already are, Aurora said, and she realized it was true. They spent the rest of the morning in the kitchen, Declan making coffee, decaf for Aurora, after frantically Googling what pregnant women could consume, her making scrambled eggs. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. The radio played softly in the background. It was mundane, ordinary, perfect. After everything, Aurora said suddenly, stirring the eggs in the pan, I can finally give you life instead of pain. Declan, who was putting toast on a plate, paused. He crossed the kitchen and hugged her from behind, hands resting on her belly, chin on her shoulder. You already gave me life, he said softly. When you forgave me, when you chose to try again. That brought me back from the dead, Rory. This baby is just— He searched for the right words. Confirmation that miracles exist. Aurora turned in his arms, the eggs momentarily forgotten. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Declan kissed her, soft, reverent, a kiss that spoke of gratitude and love and promises kept. I love you. I love you in a way I didn't know was possible. And I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life proving it. I know, Aurora whispered against his lips. I already know. And it was true. His actions over the past 6 months had spoken louder than any words. The therapy he never missed. The work he'd chosen to honor victims instead of just pursuing revenge. The patience when she had bad days. The way he never pressured, never demanded, just waited and proved and loved. In that simple kitchen with the smell of coffee and scrambled eggs, the past finally became just memory. Not forgotten, never forgotten. The scars were still there, always would be, but scars were proof of healing, not continuing damage. The revenge that began the story had transformed into the love that ended it. From pain came healing. From lies, truth. From betrayal, forgiveness. And from destruction, life. Aurora and Declan were no longer the people who met in the rain. She was no longer the naive artist who'd never trusted anyone. He was no longer the detective consumed by hatred who used people as chess pieces. They were two broken people who chose to glue the pieces together, two wounded souls who decided healing was possible, two shattered hearts who discovered that love, true, honest, worked-for love, was stronger than any betrayal. And as they stood there embracing, with life growing between them and the sun bathing the kitchen in golden light, both knew they'd found what they'd always been looking for. Not perfection, not a fairy tale ending without complications, but a new beginning, real, imperfect, and absolutely true. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't against others, they're against ourselves. Against the darkness we carry, the pain we nurse, the vengeance we cradle like a wounded child. Declan Hayes learned that destroying someone else's life doesn't heal your own wounds. It only creates new ones. And Aurora discovered that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the bravest choice anyone can make. Because choosing to trust again after betrayal, choosing to love again after devastation, choosing to believe in someone who broke you, that takes more courage than walking away ever could. Their story wasn't about a perfect love. It was about a broken love that chose to heal. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of all, because in the end, we're all just broken people trying to find other broken people who are willing to help us pick up the pieces. What if the greatest revenge isn't destruction, but transformation? What if the deepest love isn't the one that never falters, but the one that falls and chooses to rise again? If this story touched your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories that speak to the soul, stories about pain and healing, about mistakes and redemption, about the messy, beautiful journey of being human.